Okay. Please note that the public section of the meeting will be recorded and published online for public access after the meeting. Can all attendees switch off their camera and mute their microphone when not speaking? The camera and microphone should only be switched on when you are invited to speak. If you wish to speak, where possible, please use the raise your hand function on the toolbar. We have apologies from Councillor Wheeler, Amanda Croft, Bruce Fackerson and Susan Webb. And I'll just go through a quick roll call now to check who is in attendance for the minute. If you could just answer yes when your name is called, please. Councillor Lane.
Yes.
Councillor Alex Nichol.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg.
Yes.
Angela Scott.
Yes.
Ken Milroy.
Yes.
George MacDonald.
Yes.
Councillor Duncan.
Yes.
Scott Simon.
Yes.
Gordon McDougall.
Yes.
Paul Connor.
Yes.
Jonathan Smith.
Yes.
Alistair Robertson.
Yes.
Carl Leidecker. And David Milne.
Yes. Hello.
Thank you, Chair.
And Emma, I think that's Carl that's just arrived as well. So
Oh, yes.
Apologies.
okay. That's okay, no worries. Okay, thank you for that, Emma, perfect. Okay, first item on the agenda then is declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations anybody needs to make?
Chair Jonathan, sorry, I should raise my hand first.
Yeah.
Jonathan.
Yes, Jonathan.
Just as I like to do each time, the item again for the Civic Forum budget, so obviously as chair of the Civic Forum, and also any work personally with Scottish or UK government not featuring today in today's meeting here, only in the capacity of a community representative.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Jonathan. Any other declarations? Yes, Paul.
Similar to Jonathan, it's just about the Civic Forum budget in relation to ACFO.
Okay, that's fine. Any other declarations? Is that everybody? Okay, thanks for that. Just for me to send out one apology before we start looking through the agenda items. You'll be aware that item 4.1, the Socio-Economic Rescue Plan Progress Report, was circulated just last night. The reason for that was the group actually met earlier in the week, and we wanted to try and make sure that there was the most up-to-date information was provided to the committee. So that's why that came out as an additional circulation. So it's just to flag that up to people, the reasoning behind the late presentation of that. And hopefully everybody's had an opportunity to look through that before today's meeting. Okay, 2.1 is appointment of Vice Chair. First of all, wanted to welcome Chief Superintendent George MacDonald, who's taking up his place on the board as a representative of Police Scotland. You'll be aware that Campbell Thompson, who was George's predecessor, held the position of Vice Chair of the Community Planning Board. And it's my intention to propose that Chief Superintendent George MacDonald takes over that role as Vice Chair. So can we agree to appoint George as the Vice Chair of the board?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that, and welcome to George, both as a member and obviously in his Vice Chair capacity. I'm sure he's going to be a great addition to the Community Planning Board, given his experience with community planning partnerships elsewhere in Scotland. So item 3.1 is the minute of the previous meeting on the 1st of July. Now, it's here for approval, but I'll maybe just ask Michelle if she could come in on this item, because there was some discussion at the meeting on the 1st of July around one of the items, and that was in relation to the community planning budget. So Michelle, could you give us an update on discussions that have taken place regarding that?
Yes, no problem, Councillor Lane. I've been in touch with both Jonathan Smith and Paul O'Connor following that meeting, just to get some clarity on the situation around the wording that was in the community planning budget report. So in the report, and you'll see in the minute, we said that funding is provided to ACFO to support the continuation and development of Aberdeen Civic Forum. On discussion with Jonathan and with Paul, we are proposing that that wording should be changed to say that the Civic Forum funding is currently allocated to the continuing delivery of the Civic Forum Development Plan. These funds are currently held by ACFO on CPA's behalf. The development and maintenance of the Civic Forum website, equipment, meetings, administration, and events are all undertaken by Civic Forum volunteers. And hopefully that clarifies the situation.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't know, Jonathan or Paul, are you content with that summary from Michelle?
Yeah, absolutely. I know it's a very semantic difference. The main thing I think it will help with is, number one, if the Civic Forum at some stage applies to external funding, it makes clear that we don't have any paid staff positions, that it's a volunteer in terms of hours of work that are put in. However, ACFO is always very much an open door, advice, guidance, but a marked difference and graduation, if you will, I think, from the intense support some years ago with Charles and Sandy over there. So support still available, but not in a paid position capacity as it once was. And hopefully will also be helpful for ACFO as well, that if they choose to apply to various funding streams, being able to point to the Civic Forum to say, here is a voluntary group which is voluntarily staffed. And indeed, both the Council, Community Planning and ACFO have all played a key role in helping us to achieve that. So I think that's a real success story. And thank you, Paul and Michelle, for taking the time to confirm that with us.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. I think that's helpful. Okay, on that basis, are we happy to approve the minute? Not seeing any dissension from that, so I take it that we're happy to approve. Okay, that takes us on to 3.2, which is the draft minute of the CPA Management Group meeting, which took place on the 12th of August. It's here for information. Any queries or questions on that? Are we happy to move forward? Yeah, not seeing any dissension, so happy to move on. Thank you. Okay, 3.3 is the forward business planner, which to me is up to date and complete. Any queries or questions on that? Nope, not seeing anything, so happy to move on with that. And then that takes us on now to 3.4, which is the national update from David Milne. So welcome, David. We're glad that you're able to join us today. I think, David, you're going to give us a bit of a verbal update on what's happening, but you also, I think, at the last meeting put out offer that people could send questions to you if they had any queries. And I think Paul O'Connor has sent a question through, and I'm presuming that we'll maybe get an update on that question as well.
Super, thank you, Chair. Yes, absolutely. So first of all, my thanks to Paul for sending through that question. For the benefit of other board members, Paul was asking what continuing support Scottish Government plans for third sector organisations working in the face of COVID. I'm paraphrasing Paul here a bit, but I hope I'm speaking accurately. When or slightly before we went into initial lockdown, ministers announced a package of funding for communities, which included a couple of funds which third sector organisations could access, and that's been operating for the last few months, but those funds have closed. One was the Third Sector Resilience Fund to enable charities and other third sector organisations that were facing cash flow problems directly as a result of COVID to seek help. And the other fund, the Wellbeing Fund, provided support for third sector organisations to undertake additional activity and help communities in the face of COVID. As I said, those were short-term programmes that both closed, but we still have some funds remaining from that initial package of £350 million. And so ministers have very recently announced that there will be a new third sector community and recovery programme that will open for applications later in the month. So that will offer a range of offers. It'll offer tailored specialist advice for third sector organisations that have been experiencing cash flow difficulties because of COVID, together with financial support in the form of grants and loans to assist those organisations. It will also offer support for community groups and third sector organisations who are providing much needed work that's additional to their core because of the current COVID situation. Now, the details of this programme haven't yet been announced, but there's already a holding page on the SCVO website, that's the Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations website, and that will include more details will be added to that in due course, and anybody who signs up for the SCVO email bulletin will automatically be informed when that further information is available. So that's that point. I don't know if Paul or anyone else wants to come back on that before I just mention a couple of other things.
Yeah, thank you, David. That's helpful. I think Paul has got his hand up, so I'll hand over to Paul and he can maybe come back on that.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you, David. That's really appreciated. I think it was two aspects of the funding, one for the cash flow for the third sector organisations, but importantly, the funding to help organisations where across Aberdeen and elsewhere in Scotland, organisations were supporting people very quickly, directly, and those most in need. So I'm really happy to see the Resilience Fund will open up again through SCVO. One wee question. Given the impact on the finances for third sector organisations, and particularly smaller ones, often there's a threshold of £250,000, whereas if you go over that, you're not allowed to apply for some of these funds. I'm just wondering if there's any consideration given to that, and I've spoken to Maggie from ACFO as well to feed into the various other bodies that she sits on. Maggie's the Chief Executive. So I think it doesn't always take into consideration that your applications for small organisations might be for staffing, but it's not unring-fenced cash that you have that doesn't, help us in this current situation. So I think we've put that through to like Foundation Scotland, impact funders and other bodies. So David, I'm just wondering if there's any kind of conversations you can have with the people at the Resilience Fund that take into consideration small groups don't necessarily have huge cash reserves, but they might just slightly go over that threshold. So is there anything that can be done about that at all?
David, are you able to come back on that around whether there's any flexibility with thresholds and things, or whether representations could be made on that basis?
I can't say anything specifically about that, but I will go back to my colleague Chris Raftery, who Paul might know, who's leading on that, and he's my colleague here, and so I'll make that point to Chris, and if Paul's agreeable, I can maybe invite Chris just to contact Paul if there's anything else that might be helpful, just to discuss around that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that would be good. I think the group would also appreciate, the board would maybe appreciate some feedback around that if there was any movement on that.
Yes, Chair, I'm very happy to do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Paul's just indicated that he'll do that. He's happy with that.
That's smashing.
I'm not seeing any other hands, so if you, David, if you wanted to go on with the other aspects you wanted to cover today.
Sure, there's probably not very much to add. I mean, I think all I really wanted to flag up at this point are the kind of major milestones that have been arising and are forthcoming. So those real milestones I just want to flag are, as I imagine most, if not all, board members already be aware, the Scottish Government publishes Programme for Government on the 1st of September. So that really sets out a programme, basically more than anything else, to cover us until the next Scottish elections, which are May next year. So there are a lot of specifics in there I won't go into detail on, but if anybody has issues from them, I'll happily follow up on those. The second little bit I just wanted to touch base on is that it's about budgets. So we don't have any details about the nature of the budgets yet. So the Scottish block for 21-22. However, our Cabinet Secretary for Finance has told Parliament's Finance Committee that she hopes to publish the draft budget, Scottish Government budget, in December as per the usual timetable. And at that point, we'll also publish the medium-term financial strategy, which, if you like, sets out kind of more medium-term projections than the 1 year, or recently 1 year budget cycle has done. Those are provisional timings, and everything is still contingent on the timing of the UK budget. So there's a bit of still uncertainty in that, but just to give us a sense of where we are, roughly timings there. And just one other thing just to mention, and this is a joint work between COSLA and Scottish Government on a Social Renewal Advisory Board. I think I mentioned that at the last meeting. So this is really a board that's been set up to do some really rapid work, just to tease through actually what are the implications for communities, particularly those experiencing disadvantage in the face of COVID, and helping us to move on to the next stage and into recovery and renewal, and help, if you like, build resilience for our communities moving forward. So some of the initial work of that has fed into Programme for Government, but we're still expecting that some further recommendations should be coming through around November time. So there's a lot of work going on there in relation to a number of issues, including financial inclusion, housing, community regeneration, the role of the third sector, voluntary sectors and communities in supporting change. So, and there's got very strong community-based representative on the representation on the core board, plus a number of specific policy circles that are doing a lot of the rapid detailed work. So just a kind of watch the space at the moment on that.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got Jonathan, I think, wants to come in on that.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, David. It was just on the note of the Social Renewal Advisory Board, and leave to your judgment, it might be better raised under our socio-economic rescue plan update. If you're still there for then, David, or if you're having to leave beforehand, I could perhaps raise just now instead, whichever is best.
No, I'm planning to stay.
Okay. In that case, I'll perhaps save for then, in that case, and allow others to take the chance for questions just now, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Jonathan. I've got Ken as indicated. He's got a question.
Thanks very much, Chair. Hello, David. Just in relation to the Programme for Government, and also government's announced various pots of funding linked to retraining and kind of education-led recovery. I guess just a plea to use the facilities of the Community Planning Partnership to help coordinate that range of funds that potentially could impact. You'll have seen the recovery plan that the board has, and we'll get an update later on, but it seems really important that we've got a coordinated approach with these various bits of funding coming in, and the CPA is in a good position to provide that. Thank you.
Thanks. That's a good point, Ken.
Super, Ken. I really appreciate that point, and it makes my life a lot easier, if you like, being responsible for community planning policy, just to be able to feed on the eagerness of CPPs to reinforce the fact they want to be involved and actually have a fundamental role and can help add value that would rarely be dealt with in other ways. So I'm very happy to make that point with our colleagues on that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up. Any other questions for David at this juncture? Are we happy? Yes, Alistair.
Really just a point as to whether it will be standard now for the opportunity to perhaps pose questions in advance of the board meeting, if that's going to become custom practice.
Mm-hmm. I think David did at the last meeting, put out that offer that we could put the questions in ahead of time. In the past, David, we've had written briefing sheets submitted to the partnership board before the meeting's taken place, but you have been in attendance at meetings, and we generally had that when the Scottish Government representative wasn't able to come. But are you happy for people to put questions into you beforehand so that they can be answered when you come back to the board?
Thank you, Chair. Beg your pardon. There's a delay in the camera coming on. I'm very happy to do that. For me personally, speaking selfishly, this is an arrangement that works because it gives me a bit of assurance that the information I'm trying to collate on behalf of the board is information that the board wants to know about. And I can also help to make sure that the information is topical and maybe more up to date than a written report submitted 2 weeks in advance of the meeting might provide. So I think there are advantages to this arrangement, but clearly very happy to work on whatever the board itself prefers here.
Alistair, I don't know if you want to come back, but I mean, I feel that maybe the best plan might be if it's coordinated through our admin support for the board, the questions, and then they can be submitted to David, and then we can obviously get the responses back and make sure that they're collated and sent out to members as well. Is that the best plan of action? Yeah, I'm noticing you're nodding. I'm not seeing anybody dissenting from that. So perhaps, I think it was Emma that put out the initial email about David's offer, so we can perhaps coordinate it through that for future meetings, and if people have got questions or indeed just areas that they may wish David to provide some information, and we can obviously send that to him ahead of time so that he's time to prepare for that, if people are agreeable. Yeah, seeing thumbs up from David anyway, so that sounds like it's a plan. Okay, right, thank you, David. I'm not seeing any other people indicating, but we're glad that you're able to join us for the whole of the meeting, because it gives you an opportunity to hear some of the work that's going on in the ground, and then if people have got other questions, they can always pose them as we move forward. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Chair. No, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, right, that takes us on now to 4.1, which is the socio-economic rescue plan. As I mentioned, we submitted this or we sent this out, circulated it, I should say, a little bit later than planned, because we wanted an opportunity for the most up-to-date information. I accept that you've maybe not had a huge amount of time to study it, but hopefully it's been sufficient to give you a flavour of the work that's going on in the ground. I think we've got Richard Sweetnam with us at the meeting today, I'm hoping, who can perhaps answer any questions that anyone may have. There's Richard popping up now. Richard, do you want to say anything in introduction to this, or will I just open up for questions to members?
If it helps, Chair, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. The report you have in front of you today asks you to note the progress on the content of the rescue plan. In that sense, it follows the similar update we gave to the previous board meeting. as the chair said, we delayed issuing it to take account of the monthly meeting of the implementation group, which was on Monday afternoon. So before questions, I thought it might be helpful if I just update on the points made at that implementation group meeting. Under the business action plan, I want to draw this board's attention to two matters. One is the action related to the local economic partnership, which was going to be led through the Chamber of Commerce. And secondly, the action from the Business Gateway on the Centre for Entrepreneurship. On the export partnership, the Chamber confirmed at Monday's meeting that in light of the imminent 100-day notice almost on the end of the implementation period, and we're moving into Brexit preparedness, the Chamber is focusing resources on that matter, and therefore the local export partnership is less of a focus or priority for them at the moment. The group on Monday was asked to think about whether the Chamber's work on Brexit preparedness is also included in the rescue plan, and I think there will be a regular update from the Chamber on that. So although it's not an action in the action plan, the group wanted to take the opportunity of checking in on the Chamber's work on Brexit on a monthly basis. With regard to the Centre for Entrepreneurship, the Business Gateway really noted that the lack of progress per se is down to the fact that because of the guidance in the Scottish Government's route map, that action cannot be delivered or progressed while we are offices are closed. So the group agreed to keep that one in, but noted that the progress was not down to Elevator and the Business Gateway. On the people plan, the group discussed in particular two areas. Action 3.2, which related to employability support for office workers that may have been made redundant as a result of COVID. And that really, in discussions with SDS, DWP, and the college, amongst others, the group agreed that that action should probably be deleted from the plan, with the explanation that employability support specifically for office workers can be picked up through existing mechanisms. And then the second one on point I would make is action 4.3. This relates to volunteering, and ACFO lead. In discussion with ACFO, it was noted that under business as usual, they are providing support to volunteering anyway, and they're happy to contribute in that way, but the group agreed that there didn't need to be a separate action around that, so we agreed to count that as closed. And finally, in terms of place, a couple of points to make there. The amber on the place plan probably reflects a lack of an update down to annual leave in the main, rather than lack of progress. There was one exception there, and this is something that I will pick up with my colleague Gail Beattie. There was on the city centre living action, we haven't confirmed the actual lead on that, so we'll do that by the time we report back to you again. On action 3.1, this relates to local place marketing and trying to improve footfall into the city centre. Chris Foy, the Chief Executive of Visit Aberdeenshire, confirmed that there will be a specific Aberdeen City promotion being launched at the end of September, a 6-week campaign focusing on city centre attractions, so such as the gallery, the city's parks, and or the beach. So he confirmed that was happening. And then just the other points I would make, just a couple of general points really that came out of the meeting. The group asked that, as actions are closed, that we add to the reporting just the number of actions that have been closed as a proportion of each of the actions. So we will add that now as some of the actions have been closed and delivered. CFINE just made the point, and it's probably worth me repeating to this board, that in their view, demand for food bank support is not actually disappearing, and that as universal credit figures continue to rise, that this was something that they wanted to bring to the attention of the group, and it wasn't normal business as usual for them. The other comment on the plan was just a general point that, particularly on the people plan, the rescue plan is helping foster deeper collaboration and joint working in delivering some of the actions. So I wanted to bring that to your attention also. And then finally, under any other business, we spent a good piece of time at the meeting talking about the local lockdown and the impacts of that, in particular around business grant support. We collectively agreed to continue to push on raising awareness of that grant, the existence of the grant, and trying to attract further applications towards both the discretionary and non-discretionary elements of it. So that continues to be work in progress. And then finally, for your attention, Kickstart is a UK government initiative to support employers to recruit people on 6-month work placements. We in Aberdeen City Council are looking at acting as an intermediary in that, and are getting further details from the UK government. But that we agreed we would bring into the action plan under the employability support as well. So that's all I would just preface this report to you with. But if you've any specific questions, I will endeavour to answer them.
Thanks very much for that, Richard. That was quite an extensive resume, so I've got a couple of hands up already. What I had intended to do was to go through the report on a page basis if people had any queries. You've obviously, Richard, covered a number of points within those pages. So the two people that have their hands up at the moment are Jonathan and Sarah. Is it questions that you wish to ask at this juncture, or are you happy to do it if we go through it page by page so that we weren't jumping about? But is it something specific that Richard's brought up that you would like to ask? I'll take Sarah in first, and you can maybe...
I'm happy to wait till you get to the pages, because they're specific questions about some of the items on the report.
Okay, I think that's probably the better way to do it, if I'm honest. Jonathan, were you similarly minded?
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense,
Yeah.
and we can keep track as we go through.
Okay,
thank you.
Perfect. Okay, right. On that basis, we obviously had the report, the body of the report, first of all, which was pages 3 through to 3 and 4. Are there any questions on that? Sarah, your hand's still up. Is that a question? No. Okay. No questions on that then. Okay, on the actual grid itself then, page 5. Do we have any questions on page 5? Yes, Jonathan, I'll bring you in.
Yeah, bear with me. I'll ask the board's indulgence, try to be as brief as I can. It's a two-parter, but it'll come home. From yesterday or the day before is ONS figures, so the Office of National Statistics, looking at employment and activity across the UK. On this item, I think a very similar landscape in every nation within the UK, including Scotland. It looked at men in employment, about 77.2%, women at 71.6%, men economic inactivity 18.6%, women inactivity 25.2%. That's in Scotland. For this question, we also had late 2018, the Scottish Parliament's report on access to finance reported that in its estimation then Scotland lost out on roughly 7.6 to £8 billion per year as a direct result of the inequalities that women experience in accessing capital finance, i.e. self-employed and small business. I wonder, as part of this rescue plan, that is an issue which is historic, but I think it's having a particularly pronounced effect right now, both for single women, for families as a knock-on effect. Is there something either within the rescue plan or that would perhaps be more appropriate at a locality level that we can have targeted approaches to this? My concern a little bit is that a broad brush, we're going to speak to all the businesses, will engage with the businesses we already know about and will not plug that gap or make progress on an existing inequality, but which is key that we take action on just now.
Richard, do you want to come back on that?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jonathan, for that good question. So I think there's two things there I would note. The first is access to finance in relation to people wanting to set up a business or support an existing business. And then the second point I think you're talking about is specific support, labour market support around employability. In terms of the first aspect, there is nothing specific in the action plan to provide bespoke business startup support beyond that provided already through the Business Gateway as delivered by Elevator. However, I would draw the board's attention to, I think, the first action under business. We do still continue to operate Business Loans Scotland, so it's not grant support I accept, but it is loan support to anyone in business, regardless of group or area. The Scottish Government is looking at changing the parameters of that existing loan scheme to better reflect demand now in a post-COVID world. In terms of employability, I think within the people plan, the points you're making are picked up in specific actions in the people plan, and providing employability support to those specific targeted groups. And I agree that would be best and is being done best through a local approach and local supply. I think if and when Kickstart, as an example, develops, we would look to target local, jobs on the doorstep, so to speak, for that very reason.
Okay, thanks. Jonathan, are you happy with that response?
Yeah, it's perhaps, I'd suggest, is one for us perhaps to keep in mind that it's reassuring to know that we're looking at locality action in terms of employability. But again, my continuing concern is that this was a highlighted issue looking at those 2-3 years ago. Granted that it is national, it is also UK-wide, but as a backstop, something to have in the background, I think could be helpful for us to think about, are there actions we can take locally, given that the North East has such a high proportion compared to the rest of Scotland, the rest of UK, even international comparators of self-employed businesses. If they go, the impact is already bad enough. Again, my concern is that without paying attention to at least some of the known obvious inequalities of gender, of ethnic minority background, then we get to localities talking about geographic socioeconomic income. I'd suggest that as we go ahead, that might be something we'll have to start paying more meaningful attention to and tangible action on, in addition to the existing broad brush support that we have in place.
Okay, thanks for that. I'm going to bring Sarah in because she put her hand up while we were having that discussion, so it may be linked to this. Sarah.
It's actually not linked to exactly what Jonathan's talking about, but it's action 1.4 on page 5, and actually also the actions listed under hospitality. I've heard anecdotally that hospitality businesses in the city feel that the second local lockdown is kind of potentially the fatal blow for them, for some of them at least, because footfall and business has not picked up at all again. even to the levels that they were starting to see after the national lockdown was lifted back in June, July. And I wondered if the group on Monday had discussed that and whether there was any variation in this plan considered to target additional support at the hospitality and retail businesses in the city who do seem to have been particularly badly affected by the lack of public confidence in going into the city centre again.
I think it's a good point. I'll bring Richard in. I know I sit in the Aberdeen Inspired Board, and I know that they have concerns that the second lockdown has had significant impact, and indeed the changes that we've seen to how people can gather in public places is also having an impact, albeit that's a national requirement. But I think coming on the back of what we've already had with the local lockdown as well, it is really tough out there now. So Richard, do you want to come back? Do you have any discussions on Monday around that?
So the board may recall that the implementation group for the rescue plan, that is Monday's meeting, was the composition of that group was drawn from a business resilience group that was set up on the 23rd of March in the immediate response to COVID. So although, and I think just a general reflection is that at Monday's meeting, that point was reflected. But I think we in the middle of lockdown, we re-engaged with the Business Resilience Group, and the Aberdeen City and Shire Hotels Association, Aberdeen Inspired, as the chair says, and the FSB really spoke about a need to do two things. One was to try and improve consumer confidence, but also business confidence that Aberdeen was open for business, particularly from a hotel's point of view, around the fact that the city centre is disproportionately, as all cities are, disproportionately reliant on corporate travel and corporate business. So to some extent, we're influenced by the current restrictions. However, in terms of are we considering an intervention, the answer to that is yes. Discussions have been taking place with the Chamber of Commerce, with the Hotels Association, with Aberdeen Inspired, and you know, from a tourism point of view, Visit Aberdeenshire. The board will recall that as well as the council, Aberdeen City Council approving the action plan, it also approved an amount of funding to help support any actions that we might want to take forward within the plan. While that, you know, this might be a new action, however, I think we've also got to look at the existing resources we have around the Chamber and Aberdeen Inspired. But yes, it is being considered for the very reasons you say, because the hospitality sector are the second lockdown has had a significant effect.
Okay, thanks for that, Richard. Sarah, did you want to come back?
Yeah, just to welcome that. I think it's obvious that an intervention is required, and to make a potentially cheeky and unhelpful suggestion about how perhaps we could help improve consumer confidence, which is by using our now very good networks with civic and community groups in Aberdeen. So not just focusing and expecting the business community to do it, but actually as part of a community planning approach, using the civic networks that we already have, because they are the people whose confidence we need to improve to encourage them to start using our city's facilities and businesses again.
I think that's an important point, and we've all got a part to play in sending out that message that Aberdeen is a safe place to come to, because I think given that we had that extra lockdown, I mean, if you look at the requirements on our hospitality businesses and prior to them reopening and things like that, you know, the more stringent checks and regulations, there won't be anywhere else in Scotland that's had the same level of checks on them. I think the fact that they have formed an association themselves where they've come together and they put forward an action plan, they've gone above and beyond, and that's been picked up by Scottish Government. A number of those items are now being rolled out elsewhere. So I think it's, you know, in that respect, it's important to send out that message. but also it was businesses much wider than the hospitality sector that's been impacted because of the lack of footfall. So we need to get out into the public domain that Aberdeen is open for business, but it's also a safe place to visit, and particularly with the interventions and things that have gone in. And sometimes that's not heard, I think, when you see some of the negativity that there maybe has been around this issue. You know, we need to get that message out more broadly. Jonathan, your hand's still up. Do you want to come in again?
No, I'd forgotten to lower it, but thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, that's fine, thanks. Okay, on that then, can we move on? Anybody got any questions on page 6? Not seeing any indications. Page 7? No. Page 8? Page 9? Page 10? Yes, Jonathan, you've got a question on page 10.
Yes, thank you. It was for item, let me see, 3.3 for the local export partnership. And again, 2 questions here, but hopefully linked. One being really positive to see the focus on resilience in terms of existing trade with the EU, initial scoping with Norway and Guyana. A bit of concern, I think, again, in that if we are only looking at responding to what the impact of Brexit might be, particularly in a no-deal scenario, is keeping our focus there and waiting until we can respond part of what could seal the fate of those trade relationships declining? Does there need to be something where, on our own terms, either nationally, as in Scotland, or as we always have done in Aberdeen, a very international city, particularly economically, instead of waiting to see what's handed down or decisions that are made elsewhere, I do think there's more that we could be doing locally from the grassroots and up. Thinking, for example, the Lord Provost, I think, still presiding the World Energy Partnerships, his strong relationship with very timely renewal of the trade deal with Japan, just making the most of those links that we have. I'm a little disheartened to see that the Chamber had taken a decision to place that group on pause at the precise time when we need to be looking ahead to what comes next. And the second part was, broadly, as community planning, is there any steps we could be thinking about in terms of resilience as a city? Looking, for example, I'm sure it is being looked at, supplies of medicine, supplies at food banks like we talked about at Seafine, that broader piece for those that could be most vulnerable and most impacted if those supply chains are interrupted.
Okay, I'll bring Richard in, but on that point, you're quite correct that the Lord Provost has the presidency of the World Energy Cities Partnership, and he's very, very active in that role, despite the challenges we've got currently, you know, with people moving around and things. He's been doing quite a lot of virtual meetings and seminars and things around that with the links through the partnership. So rest assured, Jonathan, that at that level, certainly there's a lot of work happening. Richard, can you come in on the points that Jonathan's raised there?
Sure. I think if I've articulated that there's any less focus on exports purely around that action, I've done you a disservice, Jonathan. We, the council, have a risk register in place around Brexit, and we do that at 2 levels. 1, the impact on the economy, and 2, the impact on the institution. So in terms of the institution, things like impacts on supply chains and so forth are certainly picked up in that risk register. In terms of the economy, we really work closely with Scottish Enterprise on that, and the work that they are doing in terms of information, advice and guidance to companies around Brexit. So I don't sense there's any letting up in that regard. In terms of trade links between Aberdeen and export markets, that is an important component, and I don't think we're focusing on one country over another or one area over another. We're very fortunate in Aberdeen that a lot of our export markets are around the energy transition piece and oil and gas. And so we continue to build on those links. And I don't sense any letting up in discussions that I've been involved with as an officer on international trade and Aberdeen. And in fact, quite the opposite. So I think it's almost business as usual, but I certainly, take your points on board, and also just note that the council, not just World Energy Cities Partnership, but in its own right, it's got I think a dozen memorandums of understanding that allow us to keep those doors open between what's happening in Aberdeen and international territories as well.
Are you able to answer the second part of the question, which was?
So I think that about the supply chains, and I think Jonathan's question was around the risk of Brexit around supply chains, and as I said, that is something we monitor ourselves as Aberdeen City Council through the risk register around goods and services bought in, the procurement piece.
Okay, that's fine. Gordon, you've got your hand up. You want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Richard. I appreciate the update. Mine's a more general point. Apologies, Chair. I probably should have referenced it earlier on, but as it features on this page, I'll do it now. Richard, my question hopefully is a wee bit more straightforward, I hope. And when should we expect output measures to be available for all the actions?
That's a good question.
It's a very good question. And those of you who, Gordon, you know me, I couldn't agree more. I think I've asked the project leads to, where relevant, to provide output measures as soon as possible, not least on some of the people plans where we want to have an idea on the number of targeted supports that we want to make. Some, for example, if there's an action around Aberdeen Art Gallery opening, the output of that is the gallery is open, so it's pretty straightforward. But yes, that is something as officers that I've asked to complete for the next reporting cycle.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
We would expect to see that at the board in December then. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. I don't see any other hands, so I'll move on. Page 11. No. 12. 13. Yes, Sarah, you've got a question on 13.
Thanks, Chair. It's a general question that applies to all of the workforce projects. I think there's consensus that we're about to see a wave of redundancies across lots of different sectors, and we might be particularly vulnerable to that in the northeast, given the low oil or the low price of oil in the North Sea. And I wondered if you had access to data, or you were going to be able to get access to data about where the redundancies were coming from, so that some of the projects could be targeted to people who had been made redundant recently.
Okay, thanks for that, Richard.
Yep.
Analysis of the possible redundancies and things. I think you have some of that through your pacework and things.
Correct. Yes. Thank you. I think part of the development of the plan was informed by data on notified redundancies. So there's an obligation on employers to inform Scottish Government if they plan to make 20 people or more redundant. The flaw in that is a lot of businesses make 19 or less people redundant. However, that PACE data does indicate, I guess, two things. One is when you compare Aberdeen to other cities, we are disproportionately affected, oil and gas, but across sectors. So I think we've got 5,000 notified redundancies compared to 900 in Edinburgh, 600 in Glasgow, and 100 or so in Dundee. And while obviously I can't report on the companies, the difference between these PACE notices and ones that we've seen in an oil and gas downturn is unfortunately that they are across the board. So companies across sectors. And in response to that, and led by Skills Development Scotland, they've been doing work on what targeted support might be needed in terms of those people and getting back into the workforce. So it's reflecting the local circumstance and trying to tailor programs and intervention accordingly. So the a skills cluster met this week around that very point.
Okay, that's helpful, thanks. Okay, right, moving on then. I'm not seeing anything else. Page 14. No. 15. Yes, Paul.
Thanks very much, Chair. It's under 5.3 in relation to the Corporate Social Responsibility Platform and event on the 8th of October. So I think it's two questions. One, kind of what's the uptake from the business community from that? And I think secondly, is there anything that all the partners attending here can do to promote it if it's needing any assistance between all our networks?
Okay, that's a great question, Paul. I think I'll maybe bring in Michelle on that one, because Michelle, it's your team that's been more at the forefront of that. Are you better placed to give an update on that?
Yep, happy to give an update on that. Paul, I would have to check the most recent figures of registration, but we're quite early doors in terms of the social media and things that have gone out. So working closely with BITC to promote that as much as possible, but would appreciate the help of all partners to share the communications that are going on social media and the emails that you will have received. So yes, would really encourage you to promote that heavily, and I know that BITC are doing that on their end.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, I mean, as Michelle says, Paul, any avenues that we can use to promote that as widely as possible, we are keen to use. So if I know that you have a great reach with your own centre and also your organisation ongoing things, so we would want to tap into that as much as we possibly can. Yeah, thanks. Right, no other questions on that. Moving on, page 16. Page 17, page 18, 19, 20, 21, and that takes us through. So no further questions on that? No, okay. Thank you, and thanks very much to Richard for that. We were being asked to just note the report there, so can we agree to do that? Thanks. Okay, that now takes us on to 5.1, which is the revised CPA improvement programme. You'll see that there are 3 parts to this report. The overview of the progress that's been made to date, the Appendix 2, which is the new charters, and Appendix 3, the live project updates. So I would propose that we take it in that order. Yes, Gordon's just indicated that he has to go, and he made that known already. So thank you, Gordon, for your contribution today as well. Right, Jonathan, I think you've got your hand up first. So do you want to, if you come in and we'll hear what your question is, and then we'll take it from there.
Yes, thank you. It was just at this stage to say, I think either in this or the next section, one of the reports I had authored, it's the community engagement group on the asset transfers. So when we get to that, I'll refrain from comment, but if we have any questions from yourself or members, I'm happy to speak to those if needed.
Okay, that's great, Jonathan. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Okay, so if we take the sorry, I think I've got the 2 things conflated here, haven't I? 5.1 is the CPA, the Revised Improvement Programme 2019 to 21. Do we have any questions on this aspect? I think I was quoting from 5.2 instead of 5.1 there. I'm not seeing any hands up. 5.1, it's confirming and providing the rationale for the restart dates for the projects that have been delayed during COVID-19. And I think it's obviously giving details in there of where we are in relation to that. It's confirming that the rescheduled dates for the charters for all the projects that have not yet started, because you'll be aware that we had some of the projects that we were still awaiting. And it's also, it has been cross-referred to the socio-economic rescue plan. So that's just to ensure that the priorities that we've identified as a result of the current situation and how we see that affecting us moving forward are now aligned to those priorities. And it also will see us through this, combined with a socio-economic plan. It will see us through to the refresh of the LOIP, which we plan to take forward next July. So I think, Jonathan, you've got your hand up. So I'll take, if you've got a question on this, first of all, and then I'll open up to see if we have any others.
Yes, thank you. Just to say, completely agree with one of the statements here about halfway through the report. A great demonstration of the spirit of improvement, of partnership working. We have much to gain from reflecting on how we have behaved during this time and how the drive, passion, pace and discipline of improvements we have exhibited can be carried forward through the recovery period. I wondered at the moment, I'm not sure perhaps it's contained within one of the actions, but do we have anything in place at the moment as to how we're going to be, as we speak, not necessarily as a reflective process, but as a live one, to capture that learning as we go? Is there a way of amalgamating that, and then also to make sure that while the improvement teams will benefit from that learning, that also across the piece as a partnership we can as well? If we had any thoughts at this stage as to how we might best do that in the months ahead.
Okay, thanks for that, Jonathan. Michelle, are you best placed to answer that?
Yep, I can take that one. Yes, Jonathan, you might not be aware, but the outcome improvement groups have been going through a process this last few weeks to do that kind of learning. So I know that they've been using a tool to capture that and to reflect the impact of COVID on their projects, and then influencing the discussion around what their changes might look like going forward. So I know that there has been quite a lot of work done across the outcome improvement groups, with them having in some cases weekly meetings to hear from the project managers directly to reflect that learning. So there has been some capture of that. We've not requested it to come up to the management group and the board, really not to put that burden on the outcome improvement groups, but it definitely exists. So what I'm thinking is if there's an appetite to share that learning broader, we do have a board meeting in December where we're intending on providing a bit more of a detailed plan to what steps we'll go through to our refreshed LOIP, and we can certainly bring some of that learning forward as part of that report, just to give all members a sense of the journey we've been on over the last few months.
Okay, thanks for that, Michelle. I think that's helpful. I don't see that Jonathan's not indicating that he wants to come back, so I think he's content with that response. Any other questions on this item? Not seeing anybody indicating. Are we happy to then agree the recommendations as they appear on page 31? We're approving the improvement programme Appendix 1, and we're noting the route map of the refreshed LOIP contained in Appendix 2. Are we happy?
Agreed.
Yep. Okay, thank you. That then takes us on to 5.2. I was a bit ahead of the game there, but that takes us on to 5.2, which is the CPA Improvement Programme quarterly updates. As I mentioned, there are 3 appendices to this. There's the overview of progress, the new charters, and the live project updates. So I'll maybe take questioning in that order. Is there any questions on Appendix 1, which is the overview of progress? Yeah, not seeing anybody indicating, so take it that we're happy with the content. Appendix 2 is actually the new charters. So it's maybe best if we go through that charter by charter, just in case there's any queries, and we'll do it in that order. So the first one that we have is 3.5, which is the smoke-free pregnancy and homes. Any questions on that charter? No. Okay. The next one then is 3.6, which is the breastfeeding friendly Scotland and Aberdeen. Again, not seeing any queries. 3.7, which is child health weight, reducing childhood obesity. No, nothing on that. 5.4, I think, is our next one, which is page 107, I think, which is trauma skills and knowledge. That's ACE's awareness training. No questions on that one. Okay. 6.7, future skills. Nothing on that. Okay. 11.12, promoting well-being and good health choices. Again, I'm not seeing anybody indicating. 11.13, which is health literacy, advice and support in community-based hubs. Again, not seeing anybody indicating. And then 15.2, which is active travel walking project. Again, I'm not seeing anybody indicating, so I'm presuming that we are comfortable with projects that are there. Right, that then takes us on to the actual live project updates. Yes, Alec, you've got a question on this one.
Thank you very much, convener. It was really more hopefully a helpful comment. Would it be possible to sometimes get these appendices bookmarked in the margin? It's just if we're going through quite a number of pages electronically, it's actually slightly easier to jump to them if the clerk could possibly do that. It's just the rolling scroll. I'm sure quite a few folk are actually running down the page trying to get to the point. It's fine if you bookmarked it in your own papers, but sometimes it's more helpful if it's done that way. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, that's a helpful suggestion. I think I'm sure that those responsible for sending out the agendas and that can maybe look at that for next time round, just to make it a little bit easier, because you're right, we will have reports like this where you're coming through various different ones, and it's helpful if people can get to it quite quickly. So on that basis, we can look at it. Any other questions on the live charters? Yes. Sarah, you got a question on that?
Yes, I mean, it's entirely understandable that there's not really data, or where there is data available for the projects that have continued during lockdown, that most of the indicators are going downwards. I think in terms of analysing progress, the period since March is exceptional, and I wonder if we've given consideration as to how to indicate that in the performance reporting of these projects going forward. Because, to be honest, I'm not keen on setting a new post-COVID baseline, but maybe that is the right thing to do for some of these projects, rather than maintaining the original baseline that we started with. Because some of the cohorts that these improvement projects are working with might have seen conditions deteriorate because of COVID, so we have to take that into account. I wondered if there was any work being done to check where the baselines are, check that the targets are still appropriate, and also whether any data gathering had been done on any of the projects we don't have performance data for in this.
I'll maybe bring in Angela on this one, because obviously Angela is chair of the management group, Sarah, so I'll maybe bring Angela in. I'm hoping she's still with us. There she is.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you, Sarah. I mean, it's a good challenge. I think there's been a huge amount of work just to even get to this stage, Sarah, and to in terms of the prioritisation about what we wanted to get up and running again. But I think we can take that offline and invite all the leads to reconsider the baseline and the target based on a lot of data that we've acquired through COVID and the response to COVID in particular. So, Sarah, I think we'll take that offline, and for all of those projects that we're suggesting are continue to be live, we'll ask those leads just to review the baseline and confirm the target. I guess there's a bit of canniness on my part. Of course, COVID's been very disruptive. But much of what it's doing is just reinforcing all those vulnerabilities that were there pre-COVID. So my gut would say that most of these things are in the right space with the right targets from a system point of view. But you're quite right to just challenge around what the baseline and the assessment of need is, and we can certainly do that. And happy to bring a kind of an acceptance report back to the board if once we've done that review, if we think that we need to reset any of it. But I do think much of our LOIP was addressing the vulnerability that was there pre-COVID, and of course it remains absolutely current. So I think we're in the right space, but I think it's a good challenge just for us to go and check that baseline and the target. So happy to take that offline, do some more work through the management group, and to bring a report back, Jenny, if that's agreeable to yourself, just on any targets that we set. I think in terms of when we come to do the annual report for the partnership at the end of the year, again, we'll have to have all of that context. And on the final point that you raised, Sarah, just around data, I mean, again, as you see in the charters, and credit to Michelle and her colleagues, they're doing a lot of QA on these charters before they come to both your board and to the group that I chair. Data is a persistent issue that comes up as a barrier. And what we're trying to do is to make sure that we've tackled that before we go live with the project, so that actually going forward, we don't have some of these gaps in data sets that we're seeing. I think that it's a work in progress. So I suspect that in the reports today, some of the gaps in data were there pre-COVID anyway, and colleagues have been wrestling and trying to tackle that. But we certainly know that we've got more work to do as we consider the charters to make sure that data barriers are being tackled. And I know that Martin Murchie and colleagues are working hard on all of that. So I'd just make that generic point on the point that Sarah raises about gaps in data. It's not helpful for the improvement cycle if we can't have the data to evidence that we're able to make a difference for one person, because of course, once we can show the difference for one, then the point is to then start to scale it up. So take that point on board and give you some comfort that we are focused on that in the management group. But that point from Sarah, absolutely, it's a valid one. We'll look at the baseline and the targets, and we can bring an exception report back if we recommend any change. And in terms of your annual report for this cycle, we'll have to have a real context and explanation about what the impact was on all of the projects. And I think Michelle's earlier paper is helpful in giving that detail.
Okay, thanks, Angela. I think that's helpful. And your suggestion there about that exception report would be, would be a good idea. Okay, right, Jonathan, I think you had your hand up. Was it on this?
It is. I seem to be taking up almost all of today's question time. It was just on that note from Councillor Duncan and then there from Angela as well that I think absolutely makes sense in terms of assessing either the effectiveness of a project, the performance management, and indeed the continuing quality improvement of what it does, looking at resetting the baseline. But I think from Angela's point there, that I know colleagues across the piece, and indeed excitingly community members and third sector volunteers and more, I think have done a real piece of work over particularly the past 2 years in creating new channels of data gathering, of building up trust with communities to share particularly their lived experience, to feel comfortable doing that, to trust doing that, to know it's going somewhere. So I think it will be key that we retain the channels we have built up along the way, even if the content of what's being reported through them shifts as a result of the pandemic that we're facing at the moment.
Okay, thanks for that, Jonathan, that's helpful. Okay, right, not seeing anybody else indicating. So are we content to approve the recommendations as they appear in the report? Again, I'm not seeing anybody dissenting from that, so I'll take that we've agreed. Thank you. Okay, that now takes us on to 5.3, which is the report regarding the LOIC outcome 3 aim to increase MMR vaccine uptake. Now, Chris Littlejohn's with us, I think, if anybody's got any queries around this, but you can see from the report that we're proposing to remove this improvement project because it's seen as a single system project that's been taken forward by the Aberdeen Health and Social Care Partnership and governed by the IGB. Are there any questions on this for Chris? I'm not seeing anybody indicating. You're off the hook, Chris. No need to answer any questions. Jonathan, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank
yes.
you.
Yeah.
It was just to well, first of all, I think to give credit to Chris and Susan and colleagues. I was fortunate enough to link up with them in looking at the messaging side of things, how we share information with the community. And before this project makes its way back to health and social care, while we still have it for the moment in community planning, I wondered if there was anything on, Chris, what you may have learned about how do we combat not debate, which is healthy, not discussion, which is vital for any democratic decision making, but knowingly and conscious fake news and false news, by which I don't mean political views, but for example, here is something that you can take that will help and it doesn't, or here is a harmful substance that is being advertised and sold through online platforms with false information. I know particularly for vaccines, that has been something that worryingly we're having to confront on increasing levels globally and within Scotland. And I wondered if there's any learning from that that yourself and the public health colleagues may have identified that could be helpful, again, across the piece for these projects, where it is vital that we have community trust and break through knowingly false or knowingly dangerous information that's out there.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. Chris, do you want to come back on some of that?
Yes, I mean, Jonathan, thank you. I mean, you're raising really vital questions at a time when perhaps when there's growing population resistance to the idea of vaccination programs, and of course bringing it to the fore in relation to the potential effectiveness of a COVID-19 vaccine as and when that becomes available to us. So I think this is a really vital question that you're raising. I know that I have on a number of occasions now highlighted the importance of the community engagement group in terms of helping to find alternative routes to make communication happen. I think one of the things that we do know is that and I dare say we've known this for a long time, but I do wonder that we've had to do a bit of humble relearning, perhaps, is that there's a time and a place for authoritative messages from experts on high, but that on its own is insufficient, and indeed in some circumstances can be counterproductive, as we know, and so we need to give equal thought to how we can find people within communities who are themselves trusted voices that people will listen to, almost the community champion model, and I dare say there are other approaches as well, and I have found it really helpful that community planning in Aberdeen has the community engagement group, because it's a forum
which is such an obvious place for us to be able to bring those discussions to. So I do think that group, Jonathan, has a key role to play. And although the Improving Immunisation Programme Board, yes, is led by Health and Social Care Partnership in the city, including NHS Grampian, I do think that the people involved around that are all signed up to multi-agency working and seeing the value of partnership working, including genuine partnership with communities. So my hope is that there's nobody saying this still needs to be from on high, but actually that we work together to find ways to work with communities to spread, hopefully, helpful messages. I hope that's a reasonable response.
Thanks for that, Chris. You're happy with that, Jonathan? I think I'm not saying that you want to come back on that. So, no. Okay. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. Any other questions on this, or are we happy to agree the recommendation, which is given on page 170, I think, of the report? Happy to do that? Okay. Thank you, and thank you, Chris, for that. Appreciate your time. Okay, that now takes us on to 5.4, which is the project end report, participation requests and asset transfer. Now, this is the one that Jonathan is the author, has had direct involvement in. Are there any questions on this paper? I'm not seeing any indications. I mean, we're proposing to bring this project to an end. It is slightly different from the other projects that we have within that we normally look at with the board, because there was no agreed LOIP aim or evidence of improvement is, I suppose, a bit subjective in this one. But the reason that we wanted to bring it forward is because I think it does demonstrate the good practice in bringing a project to a timely end. It demonstrates that you can draw conclusions about the improvement that's been achieved, and that's highlighted within the report. And it also helps when we're making plans about that sustainable improvement. So, you know, I think it was important that we brought that forward. And I would hope that we'll be seeing more reports like this coming forward to the board, because I think it shows that the projects will have achieved their aims, and it will also help, I suppose, to show that projects are not continuing beyond the agreed scope, which is always a danger sometimes, and hence the reason we've got the improvement projects within community planning to be short term. I'm not seeing any queries or anything. Jonathan, did you want to just say anything about that before I just ask if we're happy to agree the recommendation?
Yeah, thank you. Just to say, really appreciate your positive comments there, Chair. So thank you for that, and indeed to everyone that was involved. I think you're absolutely right. This is a project where we knew there was something we wanted to achieve. Ultimately, the Herculean, perhaps, task as it was then of shifting the landscape towards collaboration from strategy, policy, all the way to making use of a community hall, looking at where a bus stop is, introducing a speeding project between a school and the police. That is so commonplace now. There's always the risk, perhaps, of success that we take it for granted. And it's fantastic that we can, that it's so widespread, it's so usual. And I think it's a real testament to the success of the shifting landscape in Scotland, certainly, but also, importantly, what we are doing in Aberdeen and how far ahead on making that difference we were then, and I think still are. So a track record of which I'm proud to have played a part, and looking forward to what comes next with it.
Thank you for that, Jonathan. And you know, I think everybody that's taking part should be proud of the work that they've done there, because you know, it's clear from the report what's been achieved as part of this project, and you're to be commended for that. On that basis, then, can we agree the recommendations? It's about us bringing the project to an end, but it's also about that the community engagement group will continue to have a governance lead role for participation requests, including continued collection of monthly and quarterly reports to track the performance and progress. and agree that partners will continue to provide the monthly quarterly reports to the community engagement group to inform the CPA annual report and to be updated on the CPA outcome framework and data observatory. So are we happy to agree that? I'm looking and it would appear that we are. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, that now takes us on to item 6.1. Is it? Yes, 6.1, which is the local partnership and initiative funding contribution to community planning, Aberdeen's 3 localities. As you know, in community planning, we are always delighted when we can secure some finances in order to help us move forward with the projects that we have, and indeed the work that's going on the ground, particularly in our locality areas. So we were very pleased, or I was very pleased to receive notification from Chief Superintendent George MacDonald, who's with us today, that Police Scotland has some money that they have allowed George to allocate locally, and the decision's been taken that that £6,750 will come forward to help with improvement in our 3 locality areas, being Torray, Cummings Park, Maastricht, Middlefield, Northfield and Heatheryfold, and the locality 3, which is Woodside, Seaton and Tillydrowan. So it was to highlight to the partnership that that had happened. And I don't know, George, whether you want to just say a few words around the funding and your decision about where you would like that to go.
Absolutely, thanks for that, Chair. And I suppose it is a coincidence in terms of me offering the money at my first meeting. I wasn't trying to buy favour in any shape or form.
Yeah.
It's not a huge amount of money, but my experience elsewhere is, you know, little seed funding projects in communities, particularly voluntary agencies that are working in some of these really challenging areas at the moment, which are only going to become probably more challenged with Brexit and everything that's not Brexit. Apologies, Brexit will be more challenging, but with COVID, it's difficult to separate them. But with all the challenges we've got, I think it will help, and it's something I'm keen to continue to support. It's conversations we've had with the executive to allow us to have small pots of money to allocate locally into our communities, and we'll keep trying to do that, and I'll keep lobbying and trying to get as much as I possibly can. And I think the best mechanism is to share it out there, and for the partnership to decide where this money actually gets spent as opposed to ourselves individually. So, the spirit of partnership has always been really, really strong in Aberdeen. I think quite a number of the members I've worked with previously, Paul and Councillor Gregg and various others, in relation to this type of funding, and we've been doing it for some time, and it's something that the North East has had a very strong voice on across Police Scotland in relation to maintaining this. We all know the financial challenges that all the public sector has, but you know, it's a small token, but it's something we need to keep investing in. So that's all I need to say. So thanks for that, Chair.
Thank you for that, George. And I think it is important. You know, you've highlighted there the fact that the money is being allocated to the localities, and they will take the decision about how they best utilise that money. And although it's not a huge amount, I know they're appreciative when they receive that, and the fact that they then have an opportunity to utilise that to best effect for the communities they represent and live in. Martin, I think you had your hand up. You want a question on this?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree. This is a very helpful and welcome contribution of funding. And I think that in a time where we have diminishing public resources, it's particularly generous and forward-looking of the police to make these offerings to local authorities. I don't know if it's too early to ask this, but I wondered if thought had been given to how the funding would be used. I wondered if it would be allocated via the CPTs in those areas. I would certainly like to see support being given to diversionary activities. There's a long positive tradition of, for example, sporting activities have been subsidised in these areas. So is there any information at this early stage of how this could be used, particularly for preventative purposes? Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I'm not sure that there were any stipulations put on the money that has come through. I think it was just that it would be allocated to the localities, and my understanding is that the localities would then look at how they would best utilise that money to move forward with the work that they are currently got. You'll be aware that they have locality plans as which feed down from the local outcome improvement plan. But Michelle, has there been any indication from the localities around this? It's obviously the money has not long come through, so I'm not sure whether they've even had an opportunity to meet yet to discuss any.
I think in principle, just exactly as you've described, Councillor Ling, it would be aligned to the locality plans and the kind of priority projects in those. But I think I'd be confident in saying that there would be an intention to use the money for PB in the areas as well to support community groups and their community projects, which would align to the locality plan.
Okay, that's fine, thank you. Are you happy with that, Martin?
Yep,
I mean, if there is any further feedback, we can obviously bring that to committee or whatever, that information.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful.
Okay, thanks. Right, don't see any other questions or queries on that, so that's fine. That was just being brought for our to note that money had come through. So that then takes us on to item 7.1, which is just a list of the dates for meetings in 2021. So that's just to give people an opportunity to see the programme and diary in those meetings as we move forward. So hopefully that's fine. Okay, and the last thing is just to remind everybody that the date of the next meeting will be the 3rd of December, which you know, is not too far ahead. Sorry, George, did you want to come back?
Sorry, but just a point, Chair, just in terms of the planned dates, and absolutely that's first class in terms of scoping out the next kind of 12 months. But one of the points I was going to raise is just round about, and it is very difficult with the kind of COVID lens at the moment, the ability for the board to meet informally, to almost challenge each other round about. And I suppose looking at the route map for the refreshed LOIP, I think there'll be value in us meeting offline informally and just to talk through where we think that some of the kind of challenges reflect on the progress that we've made, respecting I'm kind of new kid on the block, as it were. That's something that I've been involved previously in different areas, and it's actually given a fair bit of value to the board in terms of relationship and understanding. So selflessly, from my perspective, it'll help me get to know some of the members I don't know so well. But I realise that the challenges in terms of COVID and coming together might limit that at the moment. But I just think there would be value in us as a board meeting informally on a frequent basis, whatever that might look like. Others might have a better idea. Just a thought.
I'll bring Angela in because I think you've got your hand up, Angela.
Yeah, it was just to say it might be helpful if Martin and Michelle were able to give an overview of thinking around how we will approach the refresh. I guess we've done a combination of sharing data in advance with colleagues, inviting colleagues into kind of big room and having lots of informal, formal conversations. And I know that we've been actively planning, but it might just be worth Michelle and Martin saying a wee bit more about that, Jenny, and then we can reflect on how those plans need to be adapted given COVID context.
Yeah, I think you're right, because we're in a kind of time that we've not experienced before when we've been through these similar processes and things. So Michelle, do you want to come in first and then Martin?
Yep, sure. I mean, what I would want to bring to the next meeting is a more concrete plan of what we're intending on doing. But thinking so far is, as you quite rightly say, the last refresh of the LOIP that we did, we had a big event in the beach ballroom where everyone attended, and of course we're not in those circumstances at the moment that we can do that. So planning to have a number of smaller, more informal workshops to support that kind of thinking and discussion in smaller, kind of shorter groups over a period leading up to, as per our timeline, we have plans to bring forward a draft to the board in April. So certainly over the following months, definitely starting from January, we would hope to schedule those kind of workshops so we can have that rich discussion. So they wouldn't be the formal meetings that we're used to, but certainly happy to take feedback on groupings and how we can bring people together in that way to have those discussions.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. Martin, did you want to add anything to that, or are you happy with it?
Thanks, Chair. I'm happy with Michelle's answer. Probably just to say, I think we're being in a stronger position this time from a data-led perspective. So last time we had the population needs assessment, which was that point in time report. Since then, we've built that into the outcomes framework, which is something we keep up to date all the time and develop the data sources within that. So we'll be leaning heavily on that as we go into the process that Michelle's just talked about.
That's excellent. So we'll be in a strong position with that data aspect, which we probably weren't previously, as you pointed out. Okay, on that basis then, Angela, did you want to come back? Your hand's still up, or no? That's it down. Okay. On that. Oh, sorry, Jonathan. You wanted to comment. I was going to just suggest, Jonathan, that given what we've heard from Michelle, that if anybody's got any feedback that they wanted to feed into that process, then we could take that, and then we would look at how we can structure a bit of a programme around this sort of informal groupings that would help us in the lead up to the refresh and things. But is there something else you wanted to add, Jonathan?
Yeah, it was just to suggest that given the quickly moving pace that we're in with coronavirus, with Brexit on the way, likely still, we've also got the UK government budget, we'll have the Scottish government budget, etc. With that arriving very quickly before and after Christmas and New Year, would it be helpful for us to consider perhaps meeting a little bit sooner into the new year, just to give that bit of perhaps reassurance and direction across the piece that we're able to set it on our own terms? I wonder that some of that might be in place by the March meeting to make sure that we're not missing out on any opportunity to influence it as a city.
Mm-hmm. I think, yeah, that's a good point. So Michelle, did you want to come back on that? We could look at maybe scheming something in on that basis. You maybe want to take that away just now, and then we can circulate to board members what our thinking is on the discussions that we've had today. I'll do that.
Absolutely, and we'll want to very early into the new year start those workshops. That will be the plan. I suppose what we are doing is allowing for some more progress to be made against our socio-economic rescue plan, so we really can take account of how much we've achieved through that rescue plan, and then what goes into our life. But we'll bring that report in December, and with any kind of progress made already by that point.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Okay, on that basis, Jonathan, your hand's still up. Did you want to come back? No. Okay, right. Okay, so we will come back on that aspect following the discussion that we've had, but we will look forward to seeing you all on the 3rd of December, which is the next meeting, and I'm sure the way time is passing, it will be here before we know it. But thank you everybody for your attendance today and the input that you've had. I think that's been a very useful meeting, and look forward to seeing you in December. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.